Arteta! What a strike! What a screamer! Zola! And a fantastic goal! Arsenal back in it! And here's Limpar, lines it up, finds the net.
Football
Arsenal in front.
heritage. Football heritage. And loses at home. This is football heritage. United finish 4th, 5th, 6th, and 7th, and loses at home. This is football heritage.
And this is the Arsenal Vision post-match podcast. My name is Elliot Smith, and you can block me on Twitter at Yankee Gunner. I strongly recommend it. Yet, Jose's melting down, and we are all here for it. So, to help me discuss how things are going wrong at United and how the tables have turned and how now suddenly that cup that was a nothing cup is the only cup that all those shitty teams like Spurs and Chelsea and United are playing for. Meanwhile, we carry the banner, we carry the flag in Europe along with City and Liverpool. You'll find Tim on Twitter at Stilberto. Hello, Tim.
Hello there.
And Clive's on Twitter at ClivePAFC. Hello, Clive.
Hello, hello.
Hello, indeed. Which of the 12 minutes was your favorite, Tim?
I don't know. I didn't watch the entire 12 minutes because, I just didn't quite have time. But it was quite extraordinary, really, his run. And even after they beat Brighton, he was still kind of on the offensive. And
bullying Luke Shaw pretty good.
yeah. And I kind of wonder really what that's all about. I've always had this suspicion with Mourinho. I don't know if you're familiar with. I've forgotten the name of the film. It's.
I don't know if you're
Peter
familiar
Sellers.
with it. Then, to be fair,
It's Peter Sellers, and he plays a character called Chauncey Gardner, who is actually a gardener, and he keeps saying these things that everybody thinks is really, really profound. Everyone thinks that he's making these really profound metaphors about gardening, and he actually rises to an advisory job in the US government because everyone assumes that he's coming up with these literally flowery metaphors, and he's not. He's actually just talking about gardening the whole time. And that's kind of what I've always felt about Jose Mourinho. Everyone always kind of assumes that there's some big mind game, there's some psychological masterclass going on, and I've never thought that there is. I think he's just a prick. He just enjoys falling out with people. He enjoys fighting people. And for about 10 years, everyone was just like, oh, yeah, this is him, producing a siege mentality. And this is him, being the alpha male in the group. And I just don't think it is. I just think he's a prick and he likes fighting people. He likes conflict. He enjoys it. I don't think he particularly cares whether that gets the best out of his players or not. It's just he's almost like, how Harry Redknapp was addicted to the transfer market. He could not stop himself buying
fucking football manager.
like that season, Tottenham were going really well, and then he signed Ryan Nelson and Louis Saha for no reason, completely unbalanced the team because he was addicted to transfers. He had to buy players. And I think Mourinho is just addicted to fighting people. That's what he enjoys. And,
to be fair to Redknapp, there may have been some money going into his dog's bank account that was why he was addicted to transfers. But that's another story
there is
altogether.
that as well.
I mean, you know what it reminds me of, Tim? What you're describing is almost like with Trump, where there are people who say oh, he's a genius of mind games. All of this chaos that he foments is to take attention off this, or he's got this savvy media plan. When in fact he may just be a narcissist, a bloviating narcissist, bloviating.
Yeah.
And it's kind of starting to look like that with Jose. And I think even if you go back and see, he's always played this sort of dour defensive football in the hope that his expensively paid, handsomely paid attacking players would just kind of bail him out up front. And it's been lauded as some sort of genius tactic because it won him trophies with massively talented teams, Porto aside. But now in the cold light of day, I'm not so sure it's ever been anything more than just a fear-based football.
No, and it's more difficult. It's underdog football, and it's easy to get like small clubs like Chelsea and Porto playing like that.
Touche.
It doesn't work. Yeah, I'm glad you noticed that. It doesn't work at Manchester United. It doesn't really work at Real Madrid. And also, I think his methods are very short term. You know, that short, sharp shock thing. And what happens when you've been in the game for a while, people work out what you're about. And he's now managing, you know, he's in this small like circle of managing kind of elite football clubs. And all the players talk to each other. They know each other. There's so much dressing room leaking that goes on now, and everyone knows what he's about, basically. So I don't see this like picking on Pogba and picking on Luke Shaw, and I don't think it's going to do them any good, and I don't even think it's meant to. I think it's just because he has a pathological desire to fight people, and I think it's as simple as that, and always has been.
Yeah, and I'm enjoying every minute of it because this is supposed to be happening in his third season, and it's happening in the second. And Clive, I guess my question to you is, have we kind of reached the threshold with this where, you know, United have unlimited resources, and when you have unlimited resources, as long as you're not in complete chaos, you should be able to get to the top or very near the top and challenge for all the biggest honors. Is the chaos that Jose brings to United now a benefit? Are we at the point now where we want him to stay?
I think first things first, I think Mourinho is all about him, and it's all about speaking from a position of strength. And so his winning record has always given him the ability to talk from strength, right? He can quote his trophies, and he can quote what he's done, you know, winning leagues in every country he's been in.
He's happy to do it.
And yeah, and he'll tell you about it. So he's got a position of strength. The situation at Manchester United is that, okay, he's now getting strength from the length of his contract. So since he signed his contract, he started to take people out. He took out Pogba, he took out Shaw, he's attacking players because he feels strong now. Whatever happens, he'll get a nice big payoff. Right, so before the contract was being signed, there was all talks of PSG. That went quiet very quickly, and suddenly he's taking Pogba out of the team. Now he's dropping Sanchez. Okay, it may have been, you know, just for a cup game. So he's revving up. He's revving up. And my personal opinion is he's a frustrated footballer. That's what he really wants to be, and he wants to be the star. And so he's just addicted, like Tim would talk about how he read that, addicted to the transfer market. For me, I think he's addicted to trauma. And as long as that trauma's around him, he knows he can handle it, and he brings it all amongst himself because he becomes a star. I think that's what he's trying to do. I think he's trying to establish himself as the main man. And by taking out some big people, Luke Shaw's not a big person. That's just bordering on bullying. But Pogba is a big person, right? And I think by focusing on those individuals, it elevates him, right? It elevates him to a position of, I'm the main man. I've always felt he was a frustrated footballer. He walks around like he's a footballer, signing autographs like he's a footballer. And he never was a player, never will be. It's the one thing that irks him, that he hasn't got a heritage, to quote his words, as a long term in football, from a youth, you know, going through the academies. You know, he hasn't got that. So I always felt he's an outsider trying to prove himself to all the people within the game. You know, he started off as an interpreter, and that was his way in. And I think we can't deny he's done some great things, but I just feel he's a frustrated football person that likes to pull the attention towards him. And I'm with Tim a little bit. I don't think it's a master plan. I just think it shows weakness in his personality, and I think it's coming out much sooner than it normally does in this scenario. You're absolutely right. Year 2 rather than year 3.
Yeah, and look, I mean, at the end of the day, I just think, and I have no love for Manchester United, but if I put myself into the mode of a Manchester United supporter, if I could put myself into that mindset, I mean, of course I'd be a trophy hunting cunt, but like I would also expect my team to play attacking football, because when you have that, the resources that they have allow them to buy superior players. And when you buy superior players, it's incumbent upon you to play superior football. I think that is really axiomatic. I don't think you can have a $1 billion squad and set it up to park the bus. And so, you know, if I were a United fan, even with any success that he could bring, I would feel that I should be treated to better football, that the club has players that are capable of playing better football. And so I think he's just a dismal disappointment. I think he's terrible for the supporters. I think he's terrible for the players. Long may it continue. Over at Arsenal, and by the way, what a terrible couple of weeks for London-based football fans when you consider that Spurs, Chelsea, and Manchester United crashed out of the Champions League. Boom! There you go. In any event, wasn't a terrible week for North London-based football fans because, once again, North London proving itself to be red, at least in Europe, and Arsenal get past Milan, and we're on our way to Moscow, where I'm sure... Now, Tim, you are not making the trip.
No.
So you do not have to worry about the Polonium Punch. The Polonium Punch?
I'm going purely out of political protest and not because I can't afford it.
Yes, that sounds right. To be fair, can I ask you really, really quickly, and just be candid here? You know, that's what we're here for. If you had all the money in the world, would you still stay away from this one? No,
I'd definitely go.
You'd go?
Yeah.
No one's intimidating you from... I mean, you've been to White Hart Lane in the heat of battle. You're not scared of 280-pound, 6% body fat, PCP loaded up and ready to rumble Russians in the way in? No.
No. I've been to some places that are meant to be quite scary, and no, I'd have been all right with that. It is purely financial decision, and getting a visa is a real pain at short notice.
Yeah.
So,
and look, I'm sure that the vast majority of the supporters who will be at the stadium who are Russian will be lovely. Obviously, there's hooligan culture everywhere, but you just tend to spot it more in those Russian stadiums. Sometimes I think it's certainly played up, and I worry a little bit with the geopolitical situation going on that it might be exacerbated, but we'll see. So we did get past Milan, but I want to start with the lineup. And one of the things that I bleat on about, and there's so many things that I bleat on about that it's hard to keep track of them, but one of them is meritocracy, that Arsene Wenger in recent seasons has moved away from having a meritocracy, that his lineup selection is chosen sometimes more by his personal feelings for players or contract negotiations or circumstances outside of who's playing the best. I'm curious to get your balance between the decision to start Jack Wilshere over Mohamed El Neni as a tactical one, and whether it was the right tactical one versus one that was based on extrinsic factors, non-footballing factors, given that El Neni had arguably his best game as an Arsenal player, certainly one of his more progressive and dynamic games at the weekend.
I think probably the decision was made before that Watford game. I also think that Wenger was probably quite worried about Arsenal being too cautious, and therefore he wanted to stick with the original plan. He wanted to stick with the team that played so well out in Milan a week before, and I think he maybe thought, well, if I start El Neni here, that almost looks psychologically like a defensive move, and what I really don't want to do is play defensively and invite Milan onto us. So I tend to think that was probably behind it. And Jack, didn't have a great game in Milan. I thought he was slightly better in this game, actually. And also, you've got to completely rejig the team if you do that, because if you play El Neni, you got to play him next to Xhaka, which means you then have to move Ramsey into the front line, which you could do, but he'd been so effective the week before as well, playing in his normal central midfield position. Or you start Iwobi, and I don't think Arsene really wanted to do that. He didn't even bring him on as a sub. So a little bit limited choices, a little bit it would have been a big rejig, and a little bit that he didn't want to come across too defensive. I think at this stage the sentiment part with Jack is probably out the window, because it looks like Arsenal aren't budging on the contract offer, and it looks like Jack isn't really interested in the contract he's been offered. It looks like a complete deadlock. It doesn't look like anyone's massively heartbroken about that either, certainly not either of the two parties. So I'm not sure at this stage. There is a lot of sentiment in playing Wilshere ahead of El Neni, but I think it will be interesting to see what he does in the next round to that effect, particularly if El Neni plays against, say, Stoke at home in our next game and puts in a very similar performance.
I mean, I will say I was slightly surprised that Jack got the armband after Koscielny went off. That there are more senior players and players that I think maybe could have an argument for taking the armband. Although, look, Jack is an academy player, so maybe he has the longest standing connection to the club, and that may be behind it. I'm not sure temperament-wise he's really captain material, not because he doesn't have the blood and thunder in him, but maybe because he has too much of that in him. But who knows? Anyway, I mean... So, Clive, we start the game in sort of typical Arsenal fashion, we have a 2-goal away lead, and in the early minutes, Andre Silva is straight through, unmarked, and hits the side netting. And you know, I bleed on about a lot of things, and this is one of the things I bleed on about. Don't worry, you haven't just rewound the podcast. I'm just doing that bit again. Which is that we are terrible at situational football. So does it drive you nuts to see us with a 2-goal lead 5 minutes into the match, winding up with a player totally unmarked in behind our back four?
Not really. No, it's not really surprising.
How does that happen? How do you know what I mean? Like, how do you would think the one thing that you say is we're going to keep it really compact. We're going to track our runners. We're going to keep an eye on people running in behind. The midfield's going to sit a little deeper earlier. Let's get our hands around the game before we let it get too open. I mean, I know we wound up winning. We'll get into all the great stuff about it and whether Danny Welbeck will recover from that being chopped down in the area and all that. But I mean, isn't this the issue? This situational football. I mean, that could easily have been a goal, and then Çalhanoğlu's goal isn't a goal that makes it close, but a goal that levels the tie.
Yeah, I mean, what you said there is how you would approach the game, right? So you're thinking with the natural fear of a fan. Okay, let's set up nice and tight. Make sure we don't let anything happen at the first 15 minutes. Make sure we're well structured. Make sure we watch our runners off our shoulders. All sensible thoughts, right? But what do you think Wenger says? He says, let's go out there and play our stuff. Let's get on the ball. Let's move the ball through. Let's make sure we get Ozil, Jack, and Mkhitaryan on the ball as much as we possibly can. And let's get our fullbacks up to do support line runs and just play our way. That's what we do. And it does not change in the slightest. And the selection told you that, right? So we picked one of our best on-the-ball teams that we possibly have. We didn't have a thought to off the ball hardly at all. I thought that the setup of the team wasn't bad. I actually felt that Jack was... I'm not sure about him in that position. I've got to be honest with you. I think we use him as almost like a first defender. I think he's doing far too much wasted running. And I think he looked like a fish out of water slightly. But I felt the whole game we knew we were levels better than them. I thought they had moments where they showed inefficiency in finishing. But the real test of the game and the real test of the levels was once they scored, our reaction was instant. And you saw the levels go up. And I think sometimes players instinctively know if they're better than the opposition and they can turn it on. And that was a real sign to me that they thought we're better than these. And I thought we were a bit loose because of it. And they were getting shots off. And I just felt we just didn't think they were going to score. And then they did. And then we had to react to it.
Well, to be fair, they hadn't... After the Andre Santos chance, they hadn't really created anything, and we had been very much on top of them, and it was a goal that came from nothing. I mean, do you want Ospina to save? I mean, obviously you want Ospina to save that, but is it sometimes just a case of looking for a flaw where no flaw exists? Was it just a great goal?
No, I went to the game, and I was surprised that it went in. I got to be honest with you. It was a good effort. It wasn't that great. He looked like a little old man falling to the side from where I was sitting.
He looks like that, period.
Yeah, and it's not inspiring actually. That should not be going in. It was a really good effort, but the sort of effort the goalkeeper pushes around the post is the corner, and everyone claps. You don't expect it to go in, right? So yeah, I thought one or two things that stuck with me on the day actually was our lack of directness. I thought you can really. I know where Tim sits in the ground. I was the opposite side, but really quite high, right on the halfway line, so I could have a good view. And I could see the movement, and what I couldn't see was the risk-taking and the bravery to hit the first movement. And there were many times when you could see that happening all over the pitch. I think there's a general lack of directness in our play. I think we look after the ball really well. We've got a lovely technical ability when we receive it and how we move it. We get nice early pictures. But what we don't do, if I compare us to Man City, which is the vogue team at the moment, I feel they push the ball into areas that can hurt you much quicker. And they really do work from there, and they do it at pace. And I feel that we are sometimes just a little bit passive in our movements, and it's almost like a 15 passes and a goal sort of thing you do in training, right? Mm-hmm. I just feel We need to change that. It's becoming a little bit samey. And I'm not, and Tim will tell you, in the ground, people are saying, shoot all the time from all different angles. I'm not one of those, but I am saying pass it earlier, pass it quicker, pass it into areas. Don't worry about losing it. Make people defend. They're not that good. Other teams make us
Mkhitaryan seems
defend.
to be more about that, to be fair. That seems to be in his game, and it's something we've missed.
Yeah, he is, but it's there's a lovely shape and a lovely pattern to how we play. But I just feel on occasion when we have got good control, good game momentum, hurt teams a bit more. You know, you look at our goals for record compared to the other teams. It's not great in the top six, right? We are not creating enough killer moments. We are not scoring enough. And that's putting pressure on our defensive side. And I think, you know, if I could look at it from a holistic view, what I walked away from the game was definitely we're not direct enough. We're not intense enough offensively. We don't challenge people in the areas they want to be challenged. Just when they're getting tired, just when they're moved off the spot, we turn out, go out the other side. Maybe that was a 2-0 scoreline that did some of that. But I just feel it's a common thing now I see, and it's really clear when you're in the ground. You can see the lack of offensive directness to me.
Yeah, and certainly, I mean, I would argue that over these two legs, we were better about that, and certainly against Watford as well. But I definitely think it's been a problem, not just this season, but the last couple of seasons. Last season, I think it was even worse, arguably. And a lot of that was attributed to Alexis Sanchez. And who knows, maybe that Mkhitaryan coming into the side now and with Aubameyang, we'll start to see it drift out of the squad, but it's still there. And I agree with you that it's a problem. Tim, I'm going to give you a choice. You want to talk about football or the pantomime?
Let's go with the pantomime.
Okay, so let's do it. So Danny Welbeck gets into the area. Now, I want to be clear about something. In the first leg of this tie, towards the end, Danny Welbeck attempted to shoot from about 20 yards out and managed to not strike the ball and fall to the ground, and then look for anybody to bail him out with a call or something, but there was no one near him. So the very, very first question I want to ask you is, how much, use a percentage factor here. What percentage of the dive is an intentional dive, and what percentage of it is he's a new baby foal still learning to use his legs?
On this occasion, for this one, not the one in the first leg, I think there was a bit more, should we say, clumsiness about that one. This one at the Emirates, just an absolute out-and-out dive.
So you think 100%? There's no question of him just being incapable of controlling the legs.
No, because he's clumsy with a football, but he's not clumsy when he runs. He's an athlete when he runs, and he can cover ground. And that was a feel a tap on the shoulder, and he takes another step and then goes down. It's a dive. It's a really bad, unconvincing one that I can't believe two officials between them bought.
We got a lot of calls on the night, by the way. A lot, like all of them. It's pretty incredible.
Yeah. It was absolutely a dive, no questions asked.
How do you react to it?
The stadium.
Okay, go ahead.
Well, funnily enough, in the stadium at the time, because I'm slightly on the other side, I was convinced it was a penalty. So I can kind of understand how the ref might have thought so, because I didn't even wait for the appeal. I was straight up. Maybe it was because it was Welbeck as well. And if it had been a player who with more of a reputation, I might have hesitated. But I was like, oh, that's a penalty. So maybe from the referee's angle, I can understand that. The guy who's standing like 2 yards away from it behind the line, don't really understand how he buys it. So at the time, I had no idea. And it wasn't until I left the stadium and saw the videos that I understood that it was a complete dive. How do I react to it? I really, really don't know. I haven't made my mind up.
No one wants diving in the game, trees. Right? Like if I said to you, Tim, you could snap your fingers and all diving would go out of the game immediately. Yeah. Obviously, you'd snap your fingers. But given that it happens, that it's done to us, given the conversation the weird conversation that's developed around it this season with Pochettino basically saying it's part of the game. I mean, some very weird rationalizing that's gone on. Do you find yourself more open to the idea that all these other cunts are doing it? Once in a while, I don't mind if we do.
A little bit, yeah. But at the same time, I realise that's my kind of
Tribalism
bias.
sneaking. Yeah, of course.
Yeah,
of course.
yeah, and it's not really rational, and we talk ourselves around it. I think the one thing I would say is that as a kind of litmus test, I am more inured to it now when other teams do it. Like, I watch Tottenham do it quite a lot, and I have to say it doesn't bother me like it used to. And I think it's just because of the regularity with which it happens nowadays. It's a bit like, I asked a question for the Askcast Extra, like, and the way I put it was, is diving like, lunchtime kickoffs and stadium naming rights one of those things that we don't really like, but there's not really anything we can do about it now, so do we just have to accept it? But I also accept that I only asked that question after an Arsenal player did it. But I generally don't think it bothers me as much when other teams do it now. I think I've been slightly worn down by it, to be quite honest. So to be honest, I can't really be bothered with the pantomime, whether it's an Arsenal player or not. One thing I will say, and generally speaking, right, people always look to take the responsibility away from the players and put it onto the officials and the authorities and things like that. So I don't want to do that when I say this, but something I will say, and I know we've spoken about it on this pod before, I really don't understand the authorities why they're so terrified of punishing it after the fact. Like, even the FA in the Premier League brought in this, retrospective action for diving, and they don't use it. They're terrified, and I don't
counterpoint
understand.
Tim. I think you may be missing the sort of nose in front of your face here. Maybe they consider letting him play for us to be the penalty, the punishment. is that possibly where this is headed? Yeah.
There is that too. But also the other thing as well here is I saw UEFA say they're not going to take any action, and I thought, but UEFA, they never do that. They literally, right, they invented that rule for Eduardo. It was completely unprecedented.
Never been used since.
Well, yeah, because Arsenal got it overturned in court. They went to the court of arbitration and got it overturned because this rule did not exist. And I Googled it today because someone said, I swear I haven't heard of UEFA talking either way about action for diving. And I don't know, maybe someone else can try, but I did the Google test, and literally those are the only two examples I can find.
Can I give you what I think's at play here, though? But I think I know what's at play here. I mean, isn't it possible? And Tim, you are a Big J journalist, so you may know this better than I do. But couldn't this be a little bit of shenanigans where a journalist goes to some UEFA member and says, "Can you go on the record and tell me whether you're going to ban Welbeck for diving?" And he comes out and says, "No, we're not going to ban Welbeck for diving." And they come out and they say, "Well, UEFA will take no action." I mean, if they're asked the question, does it look like they're putting out a statement?
Maybe, but it does beg the question. Lots and lots of clubs compete in UEFA competitions. It's kind of difficult to believe that in 8.5 years that hasn't happened before. But maybe you're right. But at the same time, I recognise that because we're Arsenal fans, we are kind of prevaricating around this issue, and it was completely a dive. I'd have been really unhappy if it had happened against us and it had been given.
Do you think the reaction is outsized, though? I mean, it certainly feels outsized.
Yeah.
Is that my tribalism speaking, or is that the fact?
Yeah, I think it is a little bit. I think there's an element of we were the only team playing on a Thursday night when the Premier League's finished for 2.5 weeks, and there's some of that going into it as well. I did think it was quite, and to be fair, as Arsenal fans, I'm not sure. I think it's really only come from one journalist, hasn't it? I haven't seen massively widespread coverage of this, and
he gave him a 0 in his player rating.
Yeah,
I mean, he scored 2 goals. He gave him a 0.
It's a really, really odd one because, I mean, the day before you have an interview coming out with Dele Alli just strikes me as a really, really weird time.
You're going to call that an interview?
Arsenal fans.
I mean, it's a puff piece.
Well, yeah, it is. It's a total puff piece, and that's fine. I understand.
Yeah, I'm not saying it has to be Frost Nixon or anything.
yeah, exactly. But that is a really peculiar time, and I know, I know. I'm guessing that sometimes because John Cross is and was a big Arsenal fan, and he went. I have a good friend who used to go with him, and he used to go home and away. And I understand that sometimes he might have to think, yeah, do you know what? I have to show that I'm not biased here. And, maybe there's a bit of that going into it. I don't know. Maybe he was just genuinely appalled by it and had the fainting couch out. But
I think so.
It did seem quite weird, to be honest. But that's not to say that, in reality, like Danny Welbeck does deserve that. It was a dive. It was a calculated piece of cheating. And I suppose the problem most Arsenal fans have is not that they didn't think that, but that we don't see it treated the same way with, other players. And obviously Ali is the example that's always given because we're Arsenal fans and we're tribal and we hate Tottenham. And actually, I think Dele Alli gets a lot of focus for his diving. I think it's pretty well reported in media circles. So I don't think that we can honestly say, oh, no one ever talks about it when it's Dele Alli, because I think they do. But yeah, it's a weird one, but it's one of those that it's really difficult to see the wood for the trees, because it's very difficult to, even when you think you're casting your tribalism aside, sometimes it's difficult to know how much you've actually done so.
Yeah, that's fair. Well, Clive, I've got several questions for you about this, but I do want you to weigh in sort of on your feeling about, do you own a fainting couch, and did you faint on it?
No, I was absolutely convinced it was a penalty in the stadium. No problem at all.
So did you fall onto your subsequent fainting couch when you got home?
No, I didn't go home until late. I had a massive drink on that night, so I got home, and next day it was all going off on Twitter in the morning, and I watched it all because I was working from home, shall we say? So yeah, I'm not worried, right? It was a Thursday night, only team playing. Needed some media activity before the Champions League draw and Europa League draw the next day, and we were the focus. And then it's all gone a little bit quiet. I think Welbeck got touched. I think he thought he went down belatedly. I don't think it was calculated. I just don't think it was. I think it was an afterthought, and it was a very slow afterthought, which made it look like a dive. Do you see what I mean? So, and he hasn't got a reputation for doing it. I don't think he's that good at doing it, and I'm not sure he's going to ever do it again, to be honest. But I don't really care so much, because football's a unique game where if you influence one person in the middle of the pitch, you can influence the result of the game. Yeah. And every single team has focus on how they attack the referee, how they influence the referee, how they make him their 12th man. It's a game plan for many teams. You watch some European games and it's just literally two teams versus the ref until they got some sort of advantage. They've got a key player booked, and then they start playing. And Barcelona made a reputation of it, getting players sent off. I mean, this is just the way football going. If you think it's going to go a different way, then you better reduce the money, the pressure, the amount of time managers get sacked.
Well, I think Tim's solution would be bringing the VAR, but yeah, okay. Yeah.
Yeah, and let's not talk about that, right?
No, let's please not.
A whole separate podcast. But and that's the way football's going. It's a unique game where you influence one individual, and VAR is going to. I can't. Now you got me thinking about VAR. Is VAR going to?
Here we go.
Is it going to benefit that, or is it not? Right, and I say not. But yeah, it's not going to change.
Let's say this just real quick to that point, Clive. Just real quick. If you eliminate the benefit for diving, then there's no reason to do it, because you will both humiliate yourself and not get a penalty. So while I'm not saying we should bring in VAR, I'll be agnostic on that for the purpose of this pod. What I will say is, if you know that diving will lead to you being ridiculed, but also give you no chance, or a very, very, very minuscule chance of getting a penalty, that will eliminate diving over time, because it's a simple incentive issue. Once you eliminate the incentive, it'll eliminate the action. But anyway, go ahead.
It's a skill, right? So I've been having a good look at Spurs and how they do it. And I watch them when they're under pressure, when they go one goal behind. And I can see what they do. They put a lot of square balls across the area and they sprint into the box multiple times. When you're sprinting at top speed, any contact is going to force the referee to make a decision. And they do this continuously. They hit the box hard, they run into the box hard, and they provoke decisions. Right, and Dele Alli is the best at it. It's a calculated plan. I'm not saying they dive in, but they just provoke decisions and collisions and moments where you have to think about what's happening in front of you. And they do it very, very cleverly. I don't think we do that. I think we play football. If the situation presents itself, any professional will take it. And I think Welbeck took it, and I think he took it late.
Yeah.
Right. So that's football, and it's not going to change. It's absolutely not going to change. And if you try to bring in legislation after the fact, then good luck proving it. Because even Welbeck on the other day could say, I got a touch on my shoulder and I was off balance and I fell over.
Yeah.
Simple as that.
Well, all right. So look, the next, even more astounding than the penalty, is that Welbeck was the designated penalty taker. So where was your heart in the moment that you realized he was going to be taking it, and how preposterous did that seem to you?
Yeah, well, as soon as the penalty got awarded, there was a bit of kerfuffle. I was thinking, is it going to get turned over? And then you immediately start to scan the players on the pitch. You're thinking, who's going to take this? Do you know what I mean? Because Ozil can't kick it that far. Right, so and Mkhitaryan I wasn't too sure about.
Ramsey,
I'm not seeing him take a penalty. Maybe once, I've not seen him take a penalty. So Xhaka, again, I wasn't too sure. And so I'm looking around the team thinking, who's going to take this? So Ramsey was hanging over it, and then Welbeck come along, and yeah, I got to be honest with you, right? I turned around. I didn't even see it go in.
Was it a good penalty? Like I've only watched it once. I've not seen a replay of it. To me, it looks like it. Did it even hit the back of the net? I thought, didn't he just kind of like roll it and the keeper went the wrong? Like he gets the keeper to go the wrong way, so that's good. But is it a good penalty?
Yeah,
it was a good penalty. He shaped it, mate. He shaped it out and whipped it into the bottom post. Yeah, that was quality.
Okay, well, all right. So he scores the penalty. I mean, at the end of the day, we won the tie comfortably, and I just think it's insane to be having a debate about diving at the end of a 5-1 tie. And look, I realize all these individual moments matter. If we don't get the penalty there and it's still 1-0, it's still a little nervy, but there are a lot of moments in football that could go one way or could go the other way. So I just think when you pick one and you say, what if that had gone the other way? Well, I can pick 5 others and say the same thing. So I'll stay with you, Clive, for just a second here, and I'll give Tim a shot at this as well. One of the things that I thought was really, really encouraging, well, there are really two things that were really encouraging. The 3 things no one expects about the Spanish Inquisition are, the one thing that I was going to come to at this point was the Ozil and Mkhitaryan partnership. And they really seemed to be understanding when to switch sides. Mkhitaryan would pop up on the opposite side of wherever Ozil wanted to go. It seemed like he sort of reacted to Ozil's movement. They looked for each other. They found each other a lot. And they starting to develop that partnership that I think you would say Ozil and Alexis had previously. Were you really encouraged, and are you really encouraged by the way Mkhitaryan is starting to grow into the team, and specifically with respect to how he's dovetailing with Ozil?
Yeah, it's nice to see. It's not a total surprise because they're good players. You can see they're going to be on the same wavelength. I do have a concern about, I said before, about our goals. I see them as attacking midfielders. Are they going to score enough? I still would like another forward in there, right? So, well,
to be fair, we have Aubameyang and Lacazette, right? So, I mean, you know, it's easy to forget when you got Welbeck up front, but.
Yeah, but say we have Aubameyang up there, we're then relying on him to do a lot of the goal scoring. Mm-hmm. I would like to see somebody else score. I know Mkhitaryan's only just started.
well, you hate Ramsey, but he would be your guy.
No, I don't hate Ramsey.
No. It's been clearly established. It's fine. Keep going.
I don't know. But let's have a look at. It's not enough. Do you see what I mean?
Oh, I don't. I agree. We need a wide forward. We need a true winger. We don't have one.
Yeah, I'll be happy if Ramsey scores 6 goals a season but dominates midfield. I'll be happy with that. That means we're not conceding, teams are not overrunning us, and we're creating chances for our forwards that should be there to score in their part of the pitch. I don't want the burden to be on Ramsey to score goals. I want it to be on one of our forward players, whether it be in the 2 or 3, and I want our midfield to be held and to be moved and to be controlled. So I don't want him to be the person. I want it to be Ozil, Mkhitaryan, Lacazette, Aubameyang, and then Ramsey is the next one in. Do you see what I mean?
I do.
But Ozil he's not obsessed enough with scoring. Mkhitaryan we're still learning about. Lacazette we're still learning about. And Aubameyang we're all hopeful about. So I'm not convinced we have the balance yet. We've got to devastate teams more and score more. And we're not doing it. So I'm looking forward, projecting forward, and I don't see it. It's nice. They're nice players, right? Guess what? We've got 2 number 10s that can pass to each other. You know what? We've had that since Alex Head walked into the team. right? We've had it ever since, right? So, we've always had those sort of players. But I want to see more devastation, more forward players, and more goal scorers.
How about for you, Tim? I mean, I was really interested in their movement and the way they sort of seem to be in this dance together where Ozil would go where he wanted to go and Mkhitaryan would react to it and pop up on the other side of the pitch. I don't know if it was being instructed to them. Maybe you could tell from your seat if the manager was... Get it? If the manager was instructing them. No, I'm kidding. If it was just purely Mkhitaryan reacting to Ozil or vice versa, and what you think of the relationship they're developing.
I completely agree with Clive. I think Ozil and Mkhitaryan in and of themselves are developing a good relationship. The question for me is can Mkhitaryan... So I think that there's a bit of a chasm between Ozil and the striker, be that Welbeck, Aubameyang, whoever. And we saw Lacazette struggle because he just didn't have enough support. And that was even with Alexis in the team. And for me, it's can Mkhitaryan fill that space between Ozil and the striker? Now, the way Mkhitaryan played in Milan, that's promising. That because he carried a lot of goal threat and he stayed quite advanced on the shoulder of the fullback, looking to cut in. Yep. And I thought that looked very promising. But I completely share Clive's reservations about the lack of goal scorers. I think that's been an issue for quite a while. And basically what we've not really done, you can't really replace Sanchez because he's such a unique player. I can't think of too many others like him in Europe. Like, I'm not even talking about quality-wise, I'm thinking style-wise. He's more like a Neymar, really, that kind of provocateur. He likes to touch the ball, he likes to get on the ball, he likes to take people on, he likes to score goals. He doesn't have a really fixed position. There aren't many players like that around, for better or worse. I mean,
unfortunately,
for me,
you could argue we've got a few of them in our squad, in the sense that Ozil goes wherever he wants and Ramsey seems to go wherever he wants, and we have a lot of that.
Indeed, and like you said, we kind of lack a wide forward. Look at our wide forward options, and it's kind of Iwobi. We had Wilshere playing there. There's not a lot of guys who can.
They're all shuttlers or connective players or inside forwards. Or
see, I liked the idea of. He didn't have the execution in the end, but I liked the idea of Gervinho.
Oh, Gervinho.
Actually, I think Gervinho was. In Wenger's mind, when he looked at him and bought him, he thought, this is the guy that's going to get me to the byline. This is the guy that's going to take on the fullback, that can go inside or outside, right or left. Unfortunately, Gervinho was equally awful with his right and left.
So why did you give up on Theo so quickly in this team then, though? Because Theo clearly can get to the byline and deliver. I mean, he had that great season with Van Persie where he did that a lot.
Yeah, I mean, that's the player we need to replace in our setup. And I understand, I mean, he stuck with Theo for a long time and Theo didn't really improve. His end product was very, very good. But obviously, we've been over Theo millions and millions of times. I mean, that's the player we really need to replace in our setup. A better, more refined version of Theo Walcott. Someone who can add that kind of goal threat. Someone who can... maybe alongside Aubameyang it doesn't work quite so much because Aubameyang really does like to stay up front. But then I think that opens up a gap in the kind of number 10 position because, as you say, Ozil drifts around, and then does that then make Ramsey think that he has to kind of go forward? I agree with Clive. I think Ramsey's goal should be a nice bonus rather than a focal point of the team. And I would like another goal scorer in there, quite frankly, and that's not, that's nothing against Mkhitaryan. I think he's a really good player, and a player I've liked for a little while.
Is it a case?
Quite frankly,
sorry, go ahead.
Ozil, he gets the sniffles quite a bit, and he gets knee injuries when we're playing away games. Never when we're playing home games. When we're playing away games, he gets, He puts in for his annual leave.
Starting to sound a little like me here, Tim.
And so Mkhitaryan is a very useful player to have around because he can play all across, that kind of... He can play as a number 10. He can play nominally as one of the wide players. I think he's really useful to have in that respect. And for those, when we go to Newcastle away and Ozil's on annual leave again. But, I still think we need another goal scorer in there. I completely agree with Clive. I don't think we bother teams enough in that respect, and that's why, a couple of weeks ago I wrote that piece suggesting that Lacazette and Aubameyang together might be worth investigating.
Well, yeah, and I think given what we need in midfield and what we may be losing in midfield, and given what we need at center back, and given what we need at goalkeeper, while we all agree we probably need another scorer and we definitely need a wide forward, it may be a case where we have to find a way to put Mkhitaryan, Lacazette, and Aubameyang on the pitch together with Ozil to get those goals, because we don't have the ability to buy in all of those positions, or at least I doubt we do. So it'll be interesting to see. One player who I was all the way out on, and I have to admit I have to get a little back in on because of his performances, is Granit Xhaka. He was excellent against Milan, excellent the weekend as well. I just think he has been sitting deeper. He has been more able to get some time on the ball and distribute and keep things ticking over, and he's been tracking back more, which isn't just a system thing. There's definitely a focus component to it that seems to have switched on for him. Clive, is there anything you can put your finger on about what has improved Xhaka, and have you been as impressed with, again, it's a little green shoot of recovery, let's not go overboard here, but have you been impressed with this period, and in particular how he did against Milan?
Yeah, he's been great in both those games, and he gets played a lot. I'm not sure if I might have missed one league game, if at all. If he might have played in every single Premiership game, and when you watch us play, we give him the ball a lot, and we trust him, and it's all to do with his passing and pace of pass, and length of pass. Again, when you watch the team, the ability to switch the balls from side to side is really important to create the isolations and the overloads. And he's the only one that can do it. He's the only one, and then he does it a little bit, but he's the one I trust to do it, and he really moves the ball well. The defensive side, I think he's settled back into his slot. I think there was a period when he was fighting for the same piece of grass as Ramsey and Jack, particularly when Jack was there. I think he thought, well, I'm not going to stand behind Jack. I'm going to push forward and see what happens. And there were some games, particularly Liverpool game, I felt he was in the wrong parts of the pitch all of the time. And he got a lot of stick that day because then his fundamentals of simple short passes went, and people started to pick on him, and he scored a good goal and was very aggressive in his celebrations. And but for me, he's one of those 25-year-olds that I think the future of the club's in his hands, and I've never really criticised him heavily because
me neither.
He has to work, and his best games are good enough. I've looked around at I always look at other players. Right? I look around at Matic, who's getting a lot of praise right now. I look at Xhaka, I look at Matic, and I think, well, I'd rather have Xhaka in my team. He's 25, Matic is towards 30. No, I have Xhaka. I think he's got more about him. He's got a better range. I think he can do more. I look at what Stephen Inton did the other day, and I thought he was very, very good against Manchester United. But he's very similar to Xhaka. So if we need somebody in there, it's got to be an all-action athlete, an all-action box-to-box type player that's really, that when teams turn up the heat intensity-wise, we can go with them, we can run with them and take the ball off them and drive them back. So I don't want to say the name, but it's that Vieira type, not Gilberto type we need. We need a Vieira type, in my opinion. Somebody... Good
news is those are laying around everywhere, so we'll just pick one.
Yeah, like the guy that played against us for Watford, that Decore, that type of player that can sit in, or Zakaria, who plays for Switzerland, that can sit in.
Charlie Adam, maybe?
Yeah, but also when it gets quite aggressive, when it gets quite high intensity, when you need to get physical, he can drive the game as well. And we're reliant on Ramsey and Jack to do that job. And I'm not sure for a lot of the games in England, one, neither of them are there all the time due to injury, and funny enough, Ramsey missed more games than Jack this season. And two, not every game suits them, and I'm okay with rotation in that position. But Xhaka is the one person that sets up a game plan off, and fair play to him. I think he's almost in a situation where, apart from El Neni, no one else can do his job. I'm
not sure what to make of him, and I mean it's so funny too, right? Because what happened at the very end of the first leg in Italy? He took a terrible shot late in the game that went in a row Z, and the manager was apoplectic with rage. And you think most players like, oh gosh, manager's that furious, you get it drummed in your head, don't do that again. And I realize he scored, but it's another situation where we're in control, we've got possession. I mean, we're not in control. The tie is still alive at some level, but we've got possession. There are players pushed up the pitch, and he shoots from, a position that has a very, very, very low chance of going in, and he doesn't even catch it that cleanly, and it sneaks in and it's a goal. But it's funny because clearly he doesn't care. He's going to do what he wants to do. I will say, in the build-up to the Welbeck second, I guess that was our third goal, El Neni has a brilliant play. He receives the ball right in the center of the pitch, opens his body to receive it, and then slides a line-breaking pass into Danny Welbeck. And I think that dynamism that's now creeping into his game makes him a player who has to get consideration for playing in a part of the pitch where we have a lot of flawed players. But, I mean, Tim, do you agree that there's been a resurgence in Xhaka's game, and that is there a reason you want to point to beyond just maybe him rededicating himself?
Yeah, there has been. He's been really, really good lately, and I'm not sure what it is. Maybe he's acclimatizing a bit. Maybe it's just a bit of form. I tend to think Ramsey has played, particularly in these two legs against Milan, has played a far more disciplined role alongside him. He's really kind of stuck with him, and that's kind of helped. And I think Xhaka and El Neni in home games can work quite well. I tend to think, I listened to a discussion you guys had, maybe it was after the Watford podcast, and I tend to think El Neni's best performances are always at home and his worst ones are always away. And I wonder if that's just to do with the amount of time our deeper midfielders get on the ball when we play at the Emirates. And I tend to think that might be a little bit at play here as well. And, those distances look a bit better. One really interesting thing, Xhaka's last 5 goals have been against Manchester United, Liverpool, Chelsea, AC Milan, and there's another one in there that I've forgotten. But
so he can't do it on a wet, cold night in Stoke, is what you're saying?
No. But all his goals come against some of the bigger teams, which is really odd. And again, maybe that's just because he gets a little bit more time on the ball.
Do you want him shooting? Up. Do you want him shooting from range? I mean, in your ideal world, would you get that out of his game?
Yeah, I mean, listen, sometimes you got to pick your moment, right? And sometimes it falls for you nicely. Sometimes you feel good. And, if you're judicious about it, and the ball drops nicely for you, you've got plenty of time and there's nothing better on, then I'm kind of fine with it. I'm not sure judiciousness is one of Xhaka's better qualities. I think he's quite impulsive. But what's really weird as well is that a lot of his shots have been quite savable. I mean, there's that one that against Liverpool, which Mignolet made a balls of because Mignolet is a dreadful goalkeeper. Donnarumma certainly isn't. So that seemed like a weird mistake.
I mean, it is a mistake, right? He's got to stop that.
Absolutely. And against the one he scored against Man U took a massive deflection. So, maybe there's just an element of luck in all of them as well. But yeah, I think he's been far better at dictating, kind of helping us to dictate the pace of the game recently. And even against Brighton, I thought he was one of our better players. So yeah, he's playing far, far better recently. And to be honest with you, I really don't know what's behind it, but long may it continue.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. So, Clive, I mean, we win the game. I don't think there's anything more we have to talk about in the game specifically, but I want to just dig into the Jack issue real quick, and then we can talk before we say goodbye about CSKA Moscow, and Tim can give us a little bit on the Continental Cup as well, that the ladies won. So, with respect to Jack, I mean, I think he's in this interesting role right now where he's kind of almost doing the Iwobi job, right? Shuttle the ball, connect the play from midfield and the forwards. He's getting the help from deeper lying midfielders who can cover more ground and have more defensive responsibility. He's getting help up front from the players who can make the runs. Is that enough from him? Are we getting enough from him? I mean, I have to admit, I was encouraged by how he was playing in December and January. I think he was more than just a valuable squad player at that point. He was one of our better performers during a very rough patch for us. But I think he has slid back. I think his not his durability, that's not the word I'm looking for, but his I'm not going to pull it out of the hat right at the moment. But
impactfulness.
Well, yeah, I was looking for essentially just his ability to maintain his levels throughout the game, and I don't know why I can not endurance. There you go. I think his endurance has to be called into question. So I mean, overall, and having said that, he did make a crucial contribution at the very end of the second leg to get us our third goal. But how do you feel about his performances of late, and whether he should be in the team as we go forward to the quarterfinals?
So I sort of split on this, right? Because he's playing higher. He's playing 10. Ozil's playing to the right and Mkhitaryan to the left. And so again, the manager has reduced the space for him. And what he's doing quite smartly is he's feeling the game and knowing when to drop in to make the third one. And he doesn't really go wide too often, but he's making runs. He's doing everything that's required of him in that role. But my eyes tell me that physically, I prefer him behind the ball. Do you see what I mean? From a deeper position. When he's behind the ball, my heart rate falls down because I think he's going to pick the right paths. He's going to know when to pop. He knows when to turn out. He knows when to drive. When he's higher, he can do those things, but I just don't have the same level of confidence in him. And then I came away from the stadium thinking, well, you know what? If Lacazette comes back or we had to make changes, say we go into the next leg and Lacazette's back, and I would seriously play Welbeck in that team, and maybe Jack comes out, right? And I'd have the extra forward.
You play Welbeck and Lacazette, position. Right? Keep Welbeck's power and running and energy in there, but then have Lacazette's sort of smoother, more controlled striker
exactly.
play.
And Jack would be the player I would take out. Now, then I went home and looked at all the compilations that fly around, and he had a really impactful game. Some of the best things came from his play. So I walked away from the stadium thinking, you can be improved upon. You're better deeper. When I went back and watched it again and watched the little clips again, he was really there, making moves, really doing behind some of the best things that we did. So I sway on him, if I'm honest. And the whole contract thing is sort of in my mind. What's going on there? Is it going to work out? The whole fan thing, I call him almost like he's our Mark Noble. He's the player that represents us, like Mark Noble does at West Ham. I think that's clouding a lot of people's views when I watch
and it's not irrelevant, by the way. I mean, I don't think we should just dismiss it as irrelevant. I realize there are some people who would do that, but you're still trying to run a business that connects with its customers, its fans.
Yeah, and we are terrible at that as a club. We don't connect. The board doesn't connect. Our owner's absent, and Casillas is the only one that tries to, and when he does, he gets.
You can understand why people have latched on to Jack a little bit, and it's not just a Brexity thing. Although I love saying that because I think it's hilarious, but it's because he represents a true attachment to the club and part of the club's culture.
Yeah, and he connects to the fans. He knows what to do. He knows what to say. He knows what they're thinking. He knows what they're feeling, and he says it. And sometimes when you watch him play, he almost knows what the fans are saying, and he reacts to it. And I sort of admire him for that. He knows when I admire him the most is when things are going wrong, because he stands up and says, "I'm not prepared to accept this. No, this is not happening with me around." And he tries to do something. There's a lot of our players, when things are going wrong, they let it go wrong. Good time players. They don't show up. They don't put themselves out. They don't show for the ball. They hide. And he's not one that does that. So I look at that, I think, you're a brave player. You care about what you're doing. You care about the result. You don't accept things happening to the football club. And I think that's why the fans like him, because that's how you feel when you're sitting or standing there. You're thinking, is someone going to sort this out? And he's the one that always tries to. Right? So that's the connection.
Not that it always comes off.
Not that it always comes off. But that's what the fans appreciate. Right, someone that does that, and I think some of our players who we put on pedestals don't do that. In fact, they go the other way, and we still put them on the pedestals.
Ironically, I know I'm cutting across quite a bit here, but it's kind of funny, right? Because we've had a conversation about him, we've had a conversation about Shaq, we've had a conversation about Danny Welbeck, and to your point about the players that don't always do that don't always respect the club and fight for the club. I mean, this is a game where quietly Mesut Ozil broke his own record for chances created in the European competition with 6. So, the blood and the guts and the blood and the thunder and all that, it's great, but you still need to produce, right?
You got to produce, and then some people walk away and think, "What did Ozil do?" Right? Well, so he's now on a different wage level, And so people are now going to judge him differently, like we did with Theo, right? Theo was somebody I thought was a decent player at 80 grand a week. When you're getting 130, 140, people expect you to trap it, head it to yourself and score, right? And so that's the issue. And Ozil now's gone up into that level. So he has 3 bad games. The press are going to turn on him because he'd earned close to £1 million, 3 bad games. And that's not good enough, right? So so the pressure will go back onto him, right? So Jack's sitting there thinking, well, we can pay us all this, and Ramsey's around the corner waiting for his 200. Why am I taking a pay cut? Why am I the one? Am I the junior boy? Remember the junior boy at work, the apprentice? He doesn't get the same money as the guys coming in. And he's fighting for his career, and he's thinking, well, I stand up, I'm brave. I understand, I love this club. Why am I being treated differently? And I've got a funny feeling it's going to end up pretty bad, and I think it'll go down bad amongst the fans.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough because I can think of legitimate footballing reasons not to re-sign him. I mean, depending on the wage, I think he's a player who could be an extraordinarily valuable squad player because of what he brings in terms of an energy and a connection to the club, and also his ability. I don't know that he should be a starting midfielder for us going forward, and there is a question of if you retain him, will he accept that? And I don't know that he will. I think his England place is very important to him as well. So a lot of open questions there. Tim, before we get on to the Continental Cup victory, because I want to make sure we give you a chance to talk about that, we're into a quarterfinal in Europe. Very, very, very long time since that happened, and it occurred to me as it was happening that this really means something to me now. And I've always enjoyed European competition. Admittedly, it's always been the Champions League, but this competition has felt horrific at times in terms of its quality, its meaning. I mean, empty stadiums, 6 o'clock kickoff times, ridiculous shit that goes on. And then we get AC Milan and we win in the San Siro and we win at home, and it's a big night at the Emirates, the biggest night probably since, as Clive pointed out to me, the FA Cup win over Spurs, but there haven't been many. I mean, the Barcelona game would be the last really big one I can think of. And now it feels important to me, and it feels special, and I think we've gotten a good draw. So really quickly, how much does this mean to you now as someone who I think would agree, haven't connected with it completely, and how are you feeling about the draw?
Yeah, I was delighted to draw AC Milan. It was kind of exactly what I wanted for the reasons you stated. I think it gave the importance, the competition, a real injection of meaning and prestige for us, even though this is a really, really poor Milan side, and you could tell they desperately lack a half-decent striker, and a lot of their players are rubbish, quite frankly, nowadays. But nevertheless, they got to this stage. Going to Milan is never easy. They're confident. They're on the back of a good run in their own league. So I felt this was exactly what we needed, in that it was a name, but it was a beatable name in its current guise. A little bit like, whisper it quietly, when we beat Real Madrid in the Champions League the year we got to the final. That was a Real Madrid team who were completely on their last legs. Ronaldo was overweight and he went that summer. Zidane retired that summer. Roberto Carlos went that summer. I think Figo went that summer. They broke that team up. Because it was right at the, it was aging. And so we beat a bit of an imitation Real Madrid side, but it didn't matter because it was Real Madrid, and it really, really gave us that boost, which, I think got us to the final in the end. I'm not suggesting this is quite as seismic as that, but I felt it was exactly what our participation in this competition needed. And yeah, once you get to the quarterfinal, like you say, we haven't been to one of those for a little while. The final starts to come in sight, and Cesca is, don't get me wrong, it's a difficult draw. They knocked out Lyon in the last round, which is no mean feat, particularly because Lyon would have been super pumped to get to the final in their own stadium. So we know they're a dangerous opponent. We know the difficulties of travelling to Russia, and I don't think we've ever won in Russia under Arsene Wenger, and it's the second leg as well. So we've got a bit to do in the first leg at home to go there and feel confident. But we're still the favourites, and we still should beat them, and we should go through. And then you're in the semi-finals, and it starts to get real. And I think also what we've got the Premier League is like disappearing into the rearview mirror, and the Europa League is coming up on the horizon increasingly as every game passes.
Do you think the manager will see it that way, or do you worry that he'll sort of stubbornly hang on? I mean, we have Manchester United, I believe, between these two legs, and it is an absolutely meaningless game, but it's Jose Mourinho and it's at Old Trafford. Is there pressure on the manager to get this? Oh, but the semi. But even still, I mean, that's good, I guess, but not good in the sense that, do you think Arsene Wenger would be able to be pragmatic enough to fully rotate and throw that away, or do you think that's going to be too big a pressure to resist?
I don't think he'll fully rotate. So we've got Stoke at home and Southampton at home, kind of around this game. I think we'll get some light rotation, a bit like we got for Watford. Something like that. Obviously, Aubameyang's not an issue. He
does have to get Lacazette some minutes, right? I mean, he can't just throw Lacazette on against CSK without having played him. So,
yeah, exactly. He's. I'd imagine he'd feature to some extent against Stoke at the very least off the bench. I think I read that he was possibly fit for the Milan game, but they wanted to take the international break out of the equation for him. So they didn't go with it. So he's got an extra couple of weeks training. So yeah, I'm certain he'll get some minutes. And yeah, as you say, he really, really needs them. But I think, we'll see some light rotation for those games. If we get to the semi, I think we might see some heavier rotation, particularly because by the time the semi-finals come around, if we've qualified, it could be mathematically, like the top four could be mathematically done. We're 13 points back.
Yeah, I mean it's done as it is, but yeah, I get your point.
Yeah, it's totally done, but it could be mathematically done by then. So, and to be fair, he'd be playing a Jose Mourinho who did this very same thing last season, who chucked the league at the end. So I mean, Jose can say whatever the hell he wants, but Arsene would be well within his right to do the very same thing, especially in the semi-final. So. Well, okay. I mean, quick word from each of you. How are you feeling in terms of on a scale of 0 to 10, confidence that we can get past CSK? Probably 8. I think we will. I'm the only thing that slightly worries me is the second leg being away, but we should win. I do think we'll go through. I think we're in a better place now, and I think we're super focused on this competition. So I think we'll have enough to get through. Yeah,
I think that's spot on. Clive, I mean, are you in that range?
Yeah, I am, and the word super focus, I mean, for all what we spoke about earlier about the Milan game, there was a focus about how we played, and there was a reaction to things that happened, which tells me the club is focused on this. And Cup team Arsenal is back in the room, right? That's what we are. So I'm hopeful. I think we'll get through, no problem.
Something to play for. I mean, Jose himself said you can start to smell the final once you're into the quarterfinals. So hopefully they can smell it, and it smells good. So we'll finish with this. And Tim, I think it's interesting because the women's football is popular in the United States. The U.S. women's team has been exceptionally successful. They've produced some incredible talent, and I have had a tremendous pleasure watching them. I wouldn't say that I'm a regular fan, but I've watched them in big tournaments and really enjoyed it. And I think women's football at the international level is very enjoyable. It's not something I have easy access to watching at the club level, so I haven't really followed the Arsenal women, but I know you follow it very closely. I know you report on it, and they recently won the Continental Cup, so maybe you can give us sort of a quick summary of how the Arsenal women are doing, what the program's like, and what it was like winning that trophy. And I realize that could be an hour-long podcast, but if you want to give us sort of your state of the women's Arsenal women's game in 5 minutes or less, that would be great.
Yeah, so this was a huge win, really, because they beat Manchester City in the final, and that's hugely important. I think, and I quite understand that most Arsenal fans probably just dip in and out and hear pretty much every year, "Oh, the girls have won a trophy again." Aren't they great? And in many respects, that's true. But I think Jordan Nobbs, who is one of, in my opinion, the best player that we have, this was the 5th time she'd won this particular trophy with Arsenal, and she said, "This is the best. This is the best time," because of the way women's football is in England at the moment. Manchester City have invested a lot of money. Chelsea have invested a lot of money. They've all brought their facilities up. Everything's professionalised very rapidly. But at the same time, I think people assume that it's very analogous to the men's game in that, Arsenal were at the top of the tree and then Man City and Chelsea chucked a load of money at it. and now we're not anymore. And actually, Arsenal have chucked a lot of money at it in response. Arsenal women are far more analogous to Manchester United in men's terms, in terms of they've got the very recent history and the prestige, and they've been a little bit knocked off their perch recently. They've not won the league for a few years, and that's not because of investment, because they've spent a lot of money. But they didn't start the season brilliantly. The manager left because results weren't going particularly well, and the morale in the squad was quite low. So they hired a new coach in December, Joe Montemurro, and if anyone's seen any of the Arsenal have just put out a really nice mini movie, 5-minute behind the scenes mini movie of the night, of the whole day actually, of the Continental Cup final, and it's been doing the rounds. But Joe Montemurro does a little huddle with them at the end, and he says, "This is the platform, more trophies. We're Arsenal. Arsenal are back," and actually, that's hugely important, because Arsenal haven't really challenged for the league when they should have. They have actually underperformed again, like Manchester United, for the resources they've put into it. And so this was a huge thing in terms of their confidence, because of the start they had. They probably can't win the league, although they're very, very rapidly making up ground. They've won their last 6-7 clean sheets in a row, so they're building confidence.
They have a ton of games coming up too, right? A little bit of fixture congestion.
Yeah, they should get to the FA Cup final as well. The path is there to go and play at Wembley in May, and it will probably be Chelsea or Man City in the final again. But where the women have been analogous to the men in recent years is they're a good cup team, because they've got great individuals who can turn up on the day. And this was hugely important, because it kind of feels like Arsenal are rebuilding again towards getting back into the Women's Champions League and challenging for the title again under this new manager. And they'll have, there's a lot of a lot of promising players who are going to be coming in this summer, particularly from Germany. So they're really looking at strengthening again. And this was, I think Joe Montemurro, the manager, his words, "We are Arsenal, we're back." That was the kind of feeling of the night, because Man City are in the quarterfinals of the Champions League. They got to the semi-finals last year. They're the FA Cup holders. They won the league last year. This is a big team, and they beat them, and they deserve to beat them. And I think for their long to medium term future, this was a huge thing. And it was a hugely delightful night. I know how hard a lot of those girls work for nights like this. And you spoke about the US women's national team. This was Heather O'Reilly's first Arsenal trophy, and it would be, her contract ends at the end of this season. But I know she's really enjoyed her time in England. I really hope she sticks around for another year. She's someone that's really bought into the club. She goes to most of the men's home games. She goes to other Premier League games. She's really, really tried to drink in the English football experience. I really hope she stays for another year. But I've spoken about this with you offline a bit. I think Heather O'Reilly is someone on the men's side they could have used a bit more in terms of their marketing, because she's hugely well known in America, and she's kind of an asset that we have at the football club. So it was a fantastic night, and really pleased for all of them. They probably can't win the league, but would be great if they could win the FA Cup as well. That's great.
So for anybody who's not following the women and who might want to at least have a look, see what it's about, what would be a big game, a good game that's on the horizon that someone should target to look out for, as opposed to just sort of your regular, hey, we're playing Huddersfield at home kind of thing?
Well, they're playing at home to Chelsea on the 1st of April at home. And if they're going to qualify for the Champions League, they really have to win this. It's being screened live on BBC, so you should be able to pick up a stream.
And that's Easter, isn't it?
Yeah, the problem is it clashes with our home game against Stoke. It's on at the same time, which is a slight frustration. But other than that, they should be in the FA Cup semi-final. They really should beat Charlton, who are 2 divisions below them, in the quarter-final. That will also be on BBC on the 15th of April. So, yeah.
All right, so some good things to look forward. The Chelsea game, if you want to bin the meaningless Stoke Premier League game, and then you could try to check out the FA Cup semi-final, assuming we don't choke it away in the quarter-final. Okay, well, Tim, I appreciate that. Tim's on Twitter at Stilberto.
My pleasure, as always, and thanks for putting up with the croaky voice.
No, I hardly noticed it. As you do, I mute it when you guys are talking and just read the newspaper. Who am I kidding? I just read Twitter. Clive's on Twitter at ClivePFC. Thanks, Clive.
Thanks a lot, mate.
Yeah, always a pleasure. My name's Elliot Smith. You can block me on Twitter at Yankee Gunner. Give us a 5-star review. Do that. Do it. Because when you do that, you make your voice heard, and then when we see that you gave us a 5-star review, we quietly say nice things about you on our WhatsApp group. So that's good. But you can say nasty things in the review itself, just as long as it has 5 stars. Fine, everybody wins. In any event, we will be back in 72 years when we play our next game. It's in April, I think, actually. As we now know, thanks to Tim, it's April 1st. It's Easter Sunday. So we will celebrate what is a very special day, and by special day, I mean beating the Orcs, Arsenal 10, Stoke 0.